In this video, we'll be discussing the short-term price action, discussing some of the hurdles that have come up, but ultimately the breakout has continued. We called this breakout yesterday. Upon a breakout of this specific yellow line right here has continued to the upside. We'll discuss that very briefly, give you a quick update on that, and then we'll discuss something very important in regards to ETF inflows and outflows, showing us that around July this year, we will potentially have a major bullish catalyst. So let's get into it. The first half of the video right here. What do we look at yesterday? We looked at the fact that Bitcoin has a major horizontal support line at 61.2K, which is built upon the highest ever monthly candle close Bitcoin ever saw, okay? Back here in October 2021. Now, that monthly candle high was reflected in the rejection in February this year. And if we go into short-term price action at 61.2K, we can see that monthly chart level, that monthly chart high in pink, 61.2K, is also acting as a short-term support zone. In fact, it has acted as the base through which we have seen this recent bounce. Okay, so we bounced off it here, here, here. There was speculation we had a few days ago we could be forming a rounding top formation, but ultimately in yesterday's video, we actually caught this breakout to basically the dollar, and we entered long positions there, broke out to the upside. We formed, actually, by the way, a preliminary bearish symmetrical triangle. I wasn't overly convinced by it though, because we just had a breakout, so it didn't seem overly convincing that we'd go downwards on Bitcoin, and of course we didn't go downwards. We also formed, by the way, a ascending wedge here on the 4-hourly chart RSI, but it seems we've broken that to the upside as well. So a couple of good signs here on Bitcoin, and that's great, but what is the next target of a short term? Realistically, that's the big question, right? And quite simply, we can get the next target on Bitcoin by looking at the weekly chart. 69K is the highest ever place we have seen a weekly candle close on Bitcoin. It is also the level of which we rejected from on yesterday on last week's weekly candle. Okay, so 69K is very clearly the next target on Bitcoin. Who knows? Maybe by the time I post this video, we'll already be there. I can't predict that, to be honest. I don't know how quick it's going to occur, but I can tell you that 69K is very much the next target. Hopefully, we don't see a rejection from that price region, because Bitcoin right now, technically speaking, is not really in an upwards trend on a short-term basis. It's entering an upwards trend potentially, but it's still facing some hurdles, some resistance here. 69K will be that next resistance zone, and then once we get to that zone, potentially by tomorrow, we'll have to assess the situation from there. I'm not willing to claim that this breakout will take us all the way to all-time highs again from the data I currently have. All I can say is that this breakout still has strength and it still looks pretty decent to me. So that's what I'm seeing on the charts right now, and I've still got long positions to reflect that. Perhaps I'll be looking to take profits around that price region. We'll have to wait and see. But again, I'll update you on that tomorrow. The fact of the matter is the breakout has progressed quite nicely. We are up about 3,500 USD from where we called that breakout yesterday, basically within 15 minutes of it occurring. So congrats to anyone who caught that with me. But right now, yeah, this breakout is still progressing to the upside. I will say, by the way, it is a little bit weak. It seems a little bit low powered. So I'm not overly convinced by it, but there's no reason for me really to be not convinced by it. If you know what I mean, right? It's not like the most convincing breakout, but I think that ultimately ties into what I'm going to discuss next, the ETFs. But now I want to get into something that's really interesting, and it's related to short term, but it's also focused on long term, okay? What we have right now, this is the entire graph of ETF inflows, right? Net inflows. So obviously above this particular line right here that says 0, we have, positive inflows, and below that line is negative inflows. What you can see is that generally speaking, ETFs have been positive. They've pumped the Bitcoin price action. We've seen, 300 million, 200 million per day on average in net positive inflows into ETFs. So it's been pretty much a net positive for Bitcoin price. But in the last 5 days specifically, 5 consecutive days, we've actually seen negative inflows, so outflows I should say, on the Bitcoin ETFs, meaning that in the last 5 days, the ETFs have actually been bad for the Bitcoin price. This is interesting, okay, because a lot of people have this bias that ETFs are only good and they only lead to upwards price action. Simply not true. If the market flips bearish, there's no ETF buying. And we've seen that very clearly, right? We see ETF volume. Let's just go to a different chart here. We can see the volume on ETF buying just dipping significantly right here. As you can see, when the market starts going downwards, you see this volume on ETFs just gradually declining. People don't care, okay? People buying ETFs care about the hype. That's generally what they're there for. I don't think many people who are buying Bitcoin ETFs are necessarily too informed about what Bitcoin is. I mean, unless they're an institution. But on an individual level, I think if you're buying Bitcoin and you know what it is, you're buying self-custody, okay? You're buying something you can actually own, not through a hedge fund. But what I'm saying is this, right? We'll cut the bullshit here. What am I saying? I'm saying that essentially we've seen 5 days of net negative inflows. Why have we seen that? We have seen that because the only ETF selling is coming from Grayscale right now. okay? The green line here, this is the zero, okay? That's where you see neutral inflows, okay? What you can see is all of the outflows are coming from Grayscale. All of them. Pretty much 99% of the outflows are coming from Grayscale. And Grayscale is consistently selling, whereas the other hedge funds are buying subject to market movements. Grayscale is consistently selling every single day. And so what we've seen is that the market has gotten less interesting over the last week or so. And so ETF buying has slowed down, but Grayscale selling has not slowed down. So Grayscale is essentially driving the price of Bitcoin downwards through selling lots of Bitcoin, and there's no counteractive force coming from other hedge funds because there's no interest in the market right now, okay? I mean, in this very short-term period, not right now as a whole. Obviously, right now in a macro bull market, I'm talking about the last week, okay? So what do we need to understand here? We need to understand that Grayscale is driving the market downwards. Therefore, how long can Grayscale sell for? Because Grayscale is putting a weight, a burden on the Bitcoin ETF, right? Even on the very positive days we've had, even on the days where we've seen massively bullish inflows, even on those days, the other hedge funds have been able to basically fight off the Grayscale selling through massive amounts of inflows coming through their buying. But if Grayscale is consistently selling over and over and over again, it's only a matter of time before ETF hype dies down and Grayscale outflows become bigger on average than the average daily inflow. So how long can Grayscale sell for? Well, what we can see is we can see how much Bitcoin they own. They owned, okay, as you can see here in blue, let me get it up here so you can see it. As you can see here in blue, Grayscale owned 600,000 Bitcoin when the ETFs were first released, okay? Now, 2 months later, they owned 600,000 when the ETFs were first released. 2 months later, exactly 2 months later, they owned 400,000, meaning there was a 33% reduction in how much Bitcoin they held, meaning they sold 200,000 Bitcoin. They sold 33% of the Bitcoin they held. Now, if you extrapolate that further, it takes 2 months to sell 33%. If you continue the rate of selling at that pace, it will take 6 months total to sell all their Bitcoin. 6 months from the original ETF release in January would be July, meaning that by July, if they continue at the rate of selling currently, they will run out of Bitcoin, meaning that by July, there will no longer be a burden on the Bitcoin ETFs, and Bitcoin ETF positive inflows will naturally increase because of that lack of burden. So I hope that makes sense. I perhaps explain that in a confusing way. It's kind of hard to articulate, but basically in simple form, Grayscale is selling a lot of Bitcoin. They're basically the only ones selling Bitcoin from an ETF perspective, and they're going to run out of Bitcoin in around July. And when they run out of Bitcoin, obviously, their selling will go away, and that leaves more room for Bitcoin to move to the upside because the buying will have much more effect if there is less selling. So it is reassuring to see Bitcoin continuing to push to the upside, even in wake of these 5 days of outflows on ETFs. It does show a degree of strength here in this price region, but I do want to remind you that if something does go wrong here, if Bitcoin does go south, it does go downwards, that's not abnormal at all, okay? I want to remind you very clearly, it is so normal to see rejections from this price region. Monthly candle, high closes. Like, for example, we had a monthly candle high in November. We got to that price region, rejected for 3 months or 4 months before we got above it. In 2020, it took a month to get above it, but the point is we found resistance there. And right now, again, we've found resistance for last month, and we're, struggling to get above it this month. And then if we look at something like the halving, when halvings happened historically, we go back to something like 2012. The halving was in November 2012. We can see that occurred, and it was only like a couple of months later, really, 60, 70 days later, that we actually started the bull market. Same thing over here in 2016. It was only like 3 or 4 months later that we actually started the bull market. In 2020, basically the same story. It was only like 3 or 4 months later that we actually started the bull market. So even the halving is not really an indicator of an immediate bull market coming. So right now, there's massive amounts of evidence that we are moving faster than schedule and a lot higher than schedule as well. So faster and stronger than expected. So if we did see a downturn of some sort, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It would actually be healthy. So it's not like the Bitcoin's in like it's not like Bitcoin's fighting for its life. And if Bitcoin fails this breakout and goes below 61.1K and goes down for a couple of months, it's not like that's the end of the world. That would be annoying and frustrating, but it wouldn't be detrimental at all to the macro structure. So keep yourself grounded. But right now, yeah, this breakout is still active. And we do have a bullish catalyst coming in July. So there's something to look forward to there. Before we end the video, I want to quickly check out a couple of things. I'd appreciate if you stuck around for them. 78.52% win rate on VIP altcoin trading signals. If you want altcoin trading signals, you can get them in the Wolves of Crypto VIP group. Check out the description for information on that. We've got the Bing X and BitGet exchanges. BingX is a global exchange. You can sign up from anywhere in the world, and BitGet is a global exchange that is KYC for everywhere except for the USA. So take your pick depending on your location, but with my referral links, you can get access to rewards and discounts that are unmatched compared to any other exchange. So check out my links below and get on those good exchanges over there. And then finally, bull market sale for Crypto Academy. If you want to learn how to trade in an educational course, you can do so with that. That link is below as well. So again, exchanges, VIP group, Crypto Academy. Thanks for watching, guys. Catch you tomorrow.